Welcomes from Ireland to everyone joining us during Laudato Si 2022. I'm here in Wicklow, Ireland, with a live audience of religious sisters, brothers, priests, and lay people, and you're joining us from all over the world at the midpoint of our discussions on faith-consistent investing, living Laudato Si. Already this morning, we've heard some really interesting stories about how religious orders, faith groups, are using their investments to put Laudato Si into practice and aligning their mission and their investment strategies. Now, with you joining us from across the world, we want to delve even deeper into this story and look at how faith communities are aligning their mission and their assets and addressing the great challenges today. They're challenges, as we know, of climate change, of ecological collapse, of social injustice, of conflict, poverty. As Pope Francis says to us in Laudato Si, everything is interconnected. And we know that how we engage with our financial system and our investments is key to change. So without further ado, let's hear from someone who many people will know very well, Father Jostrom Kuritadam, the ecological coordinator at the Vatican Dicastery of Integral Human Development, for a few words of welcome.
Hello, best wishes and greetings from the ecology sector of the Vatican Dicastery for promoting integral human development. So happy to join our event on faith, consistent investing, living Laudato Si. As we know, this year the Laudato Si week is focused on the 7 Laudato Si goals of the Laudato Si action platform. It always struck me that the 4th Laudato Si goal on which we are reflecting today, ecological economics, is almost at the center, I would say, at the heart of all the Laudato Si goals. It's because everyone, as we know, the world moves around economy. And economics, the original etymological meaning is beautiful. It's oikos nomos. It is how to govern, how to take care of our home, of our household, and in our case, of the entire planet. So we think ecological economics is fundamental. But how can we make sure that our economy is consistent with our faith, especially when we invest? I think there are 2 phases in it. First of all, we need to divest from all activities harmful to the planet and the people. This is what our faith traditions are calling for. This is what Pope Francis calls us to in Laudato Si. And I'm so happy that the divestment movement is gaining pace, is growing over the years. You know, just on the 22nd of May, a few hours after Pope Francis opened the Laudato Si week here in Rome at the St. Peter's Choir, thousands of kilometers away in Uganda, there was another event, the second event of the day, where there was an event to protest against the ECOP project. You know, this project of the Total Energies that is threatening ecosystems, that's threatening the indigenous communities, and as scientists call it, which is going to create another carbon bomb. You know, the International Energy has been very clear, we cannot afford any more projects if we are to remain within the 1.5 degrees centigrade threshold. So that's the reason we were so happy that on the same day the Laudato Si week opened, we had opened by Pope Francis, this event took place in Uganda. So this is the first thing we need to do. We need to be consistent with our faith, divest from any activity, any human activity harmful to the planet and the people. Fossil fuels, weapons, whatever destroys our common home and our common family. The second part is we need to invest, again, to be consistent with our faith in activities, in initiatives, in projects that build the planet and the people. So we need to invest towards an economics that is inclusive, that is sustainable, that fights against the great inequality. We live in one common home, but we know most of the richness, wealth is concentrated in the hands of few. And that is what our webinar is going to be about. How to invest in a way consistent with our faith, and in this way live Laudato Si, put Laudato Si into practice. I want to conclude with a biblical quotation from the Gospel of St. Matthew, chapter 6, verse 21, where Jesus tells us, where your treasure is, there will be also your heart. I think if you have the ecological crisis, if you have wars around the world, if you have disharmony, so much of inequality, so much of suffering, it's because we have put our treasures in the wrong place. Our hearts are not at peace because our economy is not healthy, and we cannot have a healthy planet without a healthy economy. So I invite you to examine where is our treasure, so that our heart will also be in peace, so that we can create together a more sustainable, peaceful, inclusive world. Thank you so very much for listening to me, and have a very productive webinar. Thank you, and God bless.
Thank you to Father Jostrom for that wonderful opening statement. Where your treasure is, your heart will also be. Father Josh reminded us of the urgency of the challenge that we're facing in the journey towards integral ecology, and the centrality of working together to change our economy towards an ecological economy. We are gathered here in a very special place in Ireland. It's called Antarctic, a word in Irish that means the threshold, and it's an ecology centre run by the Dominican sisters. And in many ways it embodies the changes we need to see in our economy and in our communities in order to live Laudato Si. And I'm joined now by Sister Colette Kane, who is the director of the Antarctic Centre, to tell us a little about this very special place. You're very welcome, Colette, and thank you for inviting us into your home here in Antarctic. So Colette, can you tell us, just in a nutshell, what is the mission of Antarctic?
Thank you, Lorna, and welcome to Antarctic. And in a nutshell, Laura, the mission of Antarctic is to save the life of the planet, quite literally. And there are three facets to the mission in Antarctic. It is an organic farm on 70 acres of land, a working organic farm. There is also a large area put aside for conservation. So a pond habitat has been developed, and in the 25 years since we've been here in this centre, over 10,000 trees have been planted. And now we're seated in this beautiful ecological education centre. So saving the life of the planet is the mission of this place.
And what do you actually do here? I know we can see some slides coming up about events that are happening. You clearly convene people here. What do you actually do?
In the Ecological Centre, we facilitate programmes on raising awareness. I plan and develop and manage educational courses and retreats, facilitate days of reflection and provide tours for schools and parishes. The main programme is a biannual 10-week sabbatical programme, and delighted to see several past participants here today in the audience. And here during the programme, we explore spirituality in the context of an expanding universe, an endangered earth in the Christian tradition, primarily through the lens of eco-theology and eco-justice.
And you're part of the Dominican order, and I know the Dominican sisters have really been at the forefront of the whole transition of their investments. How did the mission of transitioning to investing in earth care, as you've done here, how did that come about?
Well, given that we've always been inspired by belief in a loving God, we celebrate and give praise for all of creation. In the late 1980s, many sisters were influenced by the likes of Thomas Berry, who wrote about the dream of the earth and the universe story. At a general chapter 30 years ago this year, the sisters discussed the crisis of a planet in peril at our hands, and we agreed at that chapter to call one another to the urgent task of helping to save the life of the planet. And as a result of that call, this project emerged and has been evolving ever since. The sisters invested in the personnel with finances. We kept the land, did not sell the land, and we repurposed this very old, century-old building, or recycled, you might say, into the beautiful centre that you are enjoying today. So, ad multos annos.
Absolutely. Obviously, the work that you've done predated Laudato Si. You were pioneers, and in a sense, we're trying to play catch-up here. What difference did Laudato Si make, particularly to the work that you're doing?
I think it has given a great imprimatur to the work of Antarctica. The word this morning that I heard over and over was endorsement. So Laudato Si really endorses all that the sisters have been trying to do here, and not just here, might I say, many Catholic religious women throughout the world have been promoting the well-being of the planet. Genesis Farm, Jubilee Farm. So it's a great, we're no longer considered on the fringes, Lorna. I think now we're considered mainstream, and that's just marvelous.
Wonderful. And what, if you could tell us just quickly about, I'm sure it's not easy to run a centre like this very professionally with all these wonderful cameras and everything. What's the biggest challenge you face?
Well, the biggest challenge I was going to say was that the human to understand our place on the earth, that we are not the apex of creation, that we are connected to the entire web of life, that communion, that we're all joined together in that splendid universal communion, as Pope Francis said. So changing mindsets. Right. Some people think we're for the birds. And actually we are for the birds. We are for the birds. And some people thought we were a bit new agey, maybe subversive, maybe not quite right. But now we're considered mainstream, and it's so essential now. The prophetic voice is now being heard, actually, after 30 years.
Well, that's just wonderful. And I guess, what brings you most joy in your work?
It's really beautiful to live and work in such a beautiful place, to be surrounded by beauty. And it's also beautiful to accompany many people on their sabbatical programs to see the joy and the delight. Sabbatical is a very biblical concept, resting the body, resting the land, and on all of the community of life. So that is lovely, facilitating that journey with people.
Thank you, Sister Colette. That is just wonderful. And if anybody is interested in the work of Tairseach, of course, you can go to their webpage, which is Antarctic.ie, and you can find out about all the things that happen here, and even consider attending that amazing sabbatical if you're able to. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lauren.
So from Antarctic, we want to hear the voices of future generations. Pope Francis talks to us, as Colette did there, about the need to change our mindset. And when our mindset changes, everything changes. And in Laudato Si, he says, what kind of world do we want to leave to those who come after us, to children who are growing up today? When we ask ourselves what kind of world we want to leave behind, we think in the first place of its general direction, its meaning and its values. Children and young people have been leading the struggle for us to wake up to climate change and ecological destruction. They really have been at the forefront of helping us to learn again about the wonder and awe of God in creation. I'd like you to sit back and listen to a message from some amazing Irish young people who in 2020 were the winners of School-O-Vision, which is the version of the Eurovision contest for young people. Please welcome the Capaboo National School from Cork.
We can make a difference in our own small way.
Just one small change, we can do that today. Our mind's getting bigger while the world's getting smaller.
But saving the earth's becoming a tall order.
From the minute you wake from your nightly nap,
You can make little changes like turning off the tap.
while brushing your teeth in the bathroom.
You can cycle or walk your way to the classroom.
Cut down the fuel you use to get to school.
Pile in, let's carpool.
In your lunchbox, cut down the plastic. See, these things aren't too drastic. Spread the word, get vocal.
Make it go global.
When buying food, stay local.
Never mind the dishwasher, do it by hand.
But I hate washing up. Ah, come on, it's grand.
Just one small change in the little things we do. We'll show you how, and now it's up to you. It's our future.
It's our earth.
We need to protect it for what it's worth. It's our future.
It's our earth.
We need to protect it for what it's worth.
Since we found out the earth was sick, we knew we had to do something quick. The earth is our family and our friend.
We need to mend it before it ends.
This is our home, so don't destroy it. Everyone should do their bit. Ice caps melting, seas getting high. Homes will be flooded, polar bears will die. The sun's getting hotter, the rain won't fall. I'm afraid we won't survive at all. Recycle the plastic, please, it's free.
You don't want that ending up in the sea. It's like people use this planet as a bin. Pick up your trash, that's where you begin.
Temperature is rising, we are realizing. We must act now, there's no compromising.
Just one small change in the little things we do. We'll show you how, and now it's up to you. It's our future.
It's our earth.
We need to protect it for what it's worth. It's our future.
It's our earth.
We need to protect it for what it's worth. If you cut down flowers and trees, you contribute to the mass extinction of the bees. Think of the creatures that don't have a say.
There has to be a better way.
There's no higher being to save the earth. We gotta do something before we get hurt.
At school we know what to do.
But my question is, do you?
Just one small change in the little things we do.
We'll show you how, and now it's up to you. It's our future.
It's our earth.
We need to protect it for what it's worth. It's our future.
It's our earth.
We need to protect it for what it's worth.
Just one small change in the little things we do.
We'll show you how, and now it's up to you. It's our future.
It's our earth.
We need to protect it for what it's worth. It's our future.
It's our earth.
We need to protect it for what it's worth.
It's our future, it's our earth. We need to protect it for what it's worth. It's a really strong message from the young people of Capaboo National School in Cork, and we're so grateful to them for this wonderful message. I'd now like to introduce our panel for this afternoon's webinar. I have here in the hall in Wicklow, Elizabeth Carlow, who has travelled here from the United States, and Nana Francois, who has travelled here from England to be with us today. Both are working and collaborating with FaithInvest, which is one of the partners for this webinar this afternoon. And they're going to be joined now by 3 other panellists who are in different parts of the world. So I'll hand over now to Elizabeth to facilitate this panel discussion on what faith communities and particular religious orders are doing in relation to their investments and Laudato Si. So over to you, Elizabeth.
Thank you, Lorna. It's really a privilege and a blessing to host this discussion with folks here in Wicklow, Ireland, and we have others joining us from Chicago, from Ontario, and from Rome, who will share their stories of this Laudato Si investing journey that they have been a part of. So I'd like to just begin by welcoming those who are joining. We have Sister Barbara Staley from Chicago and Sister Pauline Macharia from Rome, and hopefully we can get Sister Barbara's video to work here. And Father Peter Bassan was also planning to join us from Ontario. So we'll see if we can get him tuned in. So we are pioneering a hybrid virtual panel discussion. We'll do the best that we can. So it's just wonderful to be a part of this conversation. There are many groups, religious orders around the world who are taking bold and courageous action to really embody the values and the call of Laudato Si in the realm of finance and investments. And we know that very often this space can feel a little bit intimidating. We hear the language of finance and we wonder, is this for me? Is this something that I can be a part of? Can I join this movement? And part of what really helps make it feel accessible and approachable is a community of practice. And so part of what we want to illuminate today is that there are many pioneers in this work around the world who are joining this community of practice. So I'd like to start with you, Sister Pauline, to just introduce yourself, share who you represent, and maybe one meaningful way that Laudato Si is influencing the way that you're thinking about your approach to investments as a community.
Okay, thank you, Elizabeth. Good morning, good afternoon. It's a good afternoon from Rome. Happy to be here. It's an honor and privilege. Sister Pauline is an Laudato sister. That's the one people know more. But officially, we are known as the Institute of the Blessed Virgin Mary, or IBVM. I'm from Kenya. I'm a teacher by profession. A high school teacher of religion and English. And I've worked in preschools in Kenya and as a teacher and principal in the 3 schools. I enjoyed it, though, as you know, in religious life, you can be a master of all trades. I am a high school teacher, but I found myself, most of the time, I ended up working in a primary school. I enjoyed it. The children are beautiful. So I come here today representing IBVM, Laudato Sisters, but also our sister congregation, Congregatio Jesu, because we work together. So this invitation to this meeting today is because of our office, Mary Ward Justice and Peace office here in Rome. And so I represent the 2 congregations and I come on behalf of Mary Ward family. Currently, I'm the GPIC co-coordinator and living and working here in Rome. I'm enjoying my work. I love what I do because justice, peace, integrity of creation is at the heart of who we are as human beings. And I'm also very passionate about Laudato Si. I must say, Laudato Si offers opportunities to respond to social issues of our world today and the challenges of today. I loved what the young people told us, do your little bit. So I'm doing my little bit, and with the people in the network and in the Mary Ward family, trying to do our little bit with the challenges that come with it. It takes a little time, it takes a bit of organization, but loving it and hoping that we can make an impact, a positive impact to society in response to the 7 goals of Laudato Si. And so how it has influenced me, for example, and most of our family, is that we keep asking ourselves in terms of finance and investing, is it ethical? Is it sustainable? Does it respect human rights? And is it necessary? So that's important for us. Elizabeth, I think I stopped there.
Thank you, Sister Pauline. Thank you for that introduction.
Okay.
I'd now like to ask, Sister Barbara, I'm so glad you're able to join us. Hello in Chicago. Sister Barbara, I would like to ask you to introduce yourself next. Just share a little bit about who you are, the Missionary Sisters of the Sacred Heart, and how Laudato Si is currently inspiring you in this realm of investing.
Yeah, my name is Sister Barbara Staley. I'm the General Superior of the Missionary Sisters of the Sacred Heart of Jesus, commonly known as the Cabrini Sisters. And Laudato Si is just part of a whole picture of our whole repositioning all of our finances in the Institute. A couple years ago, it was clear that we have a certain amount of temporal goods. And as we really thought about what's the purpose of our temporal goods, they don't belong to the Missionary Sisters of the Sacred Heart. The church teaches very clearly that any of the goods that we have are for the people of God and that we are stewards of that. And so we decided, how is it that we can use those temporal goods on behalf of mission, not just as a mechanism for supporting our missions? And so we really have gone on to a whole journey of looking at how we can invest in high impact opportunities, particularly things that are friendly for the environment. Certainly, we had always been doing negative vetting, getting out of fossil fuels, getting out of arms, any of those sort of things. But then how can we invest and not worry so much about what our return is? One of the biggest challenges was initially we had a couple portfolio managers for our investments. And every time they would meet with me, they would tell me about how they were growing our principal. And I kept telling them, I'm not worried about growing our principal. Our principal is plenty big enough to support the life and the future of the Missionary Sisters. I want us to be able to use these goods on behalf of something else. And they really didn't understand that. So we really made an investment as a congregation to hire the appropriate people that understood our values and what our goals were, and to be able to dig down deep into the micro level of what we wanted to be doing. Because I think one of the things that certainly I believe as a religious is, we work really hard at using the professional skills and the latest understanding in the various disciplines and fields that we work in. But sometimes we sell out and don't overlay our own values on those things. So for years and years and years, you have great finance people that make sure that we're financially solid, but we don't overlay our own values and say, you know what, we can afford to take a lower return on behalf of something good. We don't need to keep growing our principal. We're plenty secure enough. I mean, fortunately, my congregation is financially secure. We don't have to worry about the future care of our sisters, certainly in the next years. And so how can we say it is okay if we take a lower return? We don't have to always be looking for the highest return on our investments. I think it's also the other thing that was really apparent to us. The reality of our congregation, like many congregations, especially those that are in the developed world, we have diminishing amounts of sisters that are available, and yet we still want to be missionaries. We still want to go to all the corners of the earth. We want to spread the love of Jesus. And now we see that by our investments in every part of the world, we are able to continue our mission, even though we may not have sisters there. We have these partners that are doing the work that we would love to be doing. We personally, the sisters would love to be doing, but we don't have those human resources. But we can support those organizations, those activities that do have the human resources to be doing the missions that we would desire to be doing. And so we feel that our footprint in the world, we're in 17 countries, but now through our investments and through our support of activities that are supportive of Laudato Si and supportive of good environment, good practice, etc. Now we're in 54 countries. So it's a great missionary outreach that we've been able to have.
Thank you, Sister Barbara. We're so struck by this concept of the way we do investing as ministry and as mission, and the way it's actually taking you to 54 countries as part of that missional outreach is really striking. I'd like to turn next to my colleague Nana, just to ask you to introduce yourself and share a little bit about your work through FaithInvest, accompanying investors around the world as they seek to be values embodied in their approaches.
Thank you, Elizabeth. So I'm Nana Francois, Director of Investment Solutions at FaithInvest. Work with my colleague, Dr. Lorna Gold, and with many others in a team that is based here in Ireland, and with colleagues in the US, and with others back in England, really working to support faith groups to do faith-consistent investing, mission-driven investing, really living out their values through the way that they manage all that they own. Financial investments, but also the land and the properties which they have ownership of. And one of the things working in this space, working globally with groups of many faiths, is the importance of having that faith foundation. So when you look at Laudato Si, you look at the big picture goals, you look at the global nature, and you look at the ways in which you can translate that into action at an organizational level. That's been really inspiring. It's been really inspiring to see how we as FaithInvest and how many other groups and partners and institutions themselves can really build that bridge between the big picture goal, those bold commitments, and what it means on the ground and the difference it can make on the ground. And so it's been interesting, and kind of as you do research and as you see where faith groups are on this journey, the ambitions are bold and growing. We did a piece of work on good intentions, really looking at the ambitions that many faith groups have today, but also highlighting some of the challenges and opportunities to help them make that journey to be more mission aligned and more impactful with everything that they own. So yeah, it's exciting to join this company of people on the journey leading us forward, and also to have everybody else gather to learn, hopefully to be inspired, and hopefully to take some action.
Thank you, Nana. So much of today is about making sure we're linking arms in this work, because this will truly change the world if we are a movement, not if we act in our own individual organizations and silos. And so we really hope that we can link arms and start to think creatively about ways to collaborate. Sister Pauline, I'd like to ask you to just share a little bit about your recent experience putting together a plan for the Laudato Si Action platform. You all have been thinking about Laudato Si as a way of life within your congregation, and you've been thinking about the practical implications of that for your investments, for your financial assets and other resources that you steward. Could you share some examples of concrete initiatives in, for example, the Spanish province, the English province, and others that are taking some really bold steps?
Thank you, Elizabeth, once again. Yes, the Merriward family is in 43 countries in the world. So we are blessed to have the number, but also presence in many parts of our world. And we put together a Laudato Si action plan, which we launched last year, and we started implementing. So it's still early, maybe to make an evaluation of so much how we have been able to move it forward. But the journey has started and it's continuing. I think that's what is most important for us. So some of the things that we have tried to do very practically is, for example, we have a human rights-based approach that we would want what we invest in must be able to respect human rights. And so that's why we ask, is it ethical? Are we doing ethical procurement? Are we doing ethical consumption? Are we respecting the issue of fair trade? Are we using goods and services that have been procured from people who are trafficked, or women and children who are not remunerated, and children should not even be working anyway? So for us, that's one. And as the children said, that, you know, the little bit that everybody can do a little bit, we can be vigilant. And so this is a very important part for us. And so we endeavor to continue creating awareness that each one of us feels part of and wanting to belong to a system and a network that would want to fight for human rights and promote human rights. The other thing as we do that is also to look at the supply chains, you know, where are the goods coming from? How have they been handled and by who, to make sure that nobody gets hurt in the process, that what we enjoy as goods and services must also be good for the people who produce them. And of course, the issue of sustainability. So reuse, emphasis on reuse, recycle, repair, right from where we have institutions, where we have ministries, we encourage what can be recycled, let it be recycled, so that we avoid the throwaway culture. We avoid the throwaway culture. I'm very impressed, for example, with the groups, two groups, one in Spain and one in Germany, where they do the food banks and they collect food that is given to the poor instead of it being thrown away. So that's something very practical, and it really impresses me. The other thing is about divestment, and therefore we continue to encourage the use of renewable energy. We talk about renewable energy. We have encouraged our people to use solar, for example, where it's possible. Of course, it's an investment. And so a few have been able to do it. I know in one of the places in India, for example, Patna, some have been able to use it or to put solar panels. I know in my own province in Eastern Africa, there's a good bit of effort towards solar system of energy, and that's something very good. The idea is we want to divest, but by divesting, one of the ways is to shrink the demand for the fossil fuels. If we shrink the demand, the supply will also go down. So we think and we feel that that would be a way towards that. The other area is on advocacy. We have to advocate for Mother Nature. We have to advocate for economical. What did I want to say? You know, our economy must be ethical, and we are hoping that we continue to promote ways that make our world better. For example, in Canada, I know they have in one of the universities, they buy fair trade goods. That's part of advocacy. Another part of advocacy is using their investment portfolio, using their investment portfolio to push or influence two initiatives. For example, the Canada's Modern Slavery Legislation Initiative and Reconciliation and Responsible Investment Initiative. That's a big one. It's a big investment for the people, for our world, for our environment. And I know that in Australia, they are also trying to keep themselves informed about the exploitive industries that will go for mining, etc., and how that affects human beings and how that affects the environment, and then to evaluate the economics or the finances of the province to see how to respond. Where it's bad and where they need to speak, then they're prepared to speak on behalf of the people, on behalf of the environment, on behalf of the indigenous people of Australia. I think, Elizabeth, I leave it there for now.
Beautiful. Thank you for that rich reflection, Sister Pauline. I heard so much to take away there in this realm of shareholder advocacy. How are we showing up as stewards of assets in ways that really shape and demand a different kind of marketplace? I also heard a lot of really important reflection on the interconnectedness of our economic system, the recognition that our supply chains must be evaluated to truly understand the impacts that our investment holdings are having across a variety of industries and actors and stakeholders. And so it's so impressive the questions that you're asking yourselves to think holistically about your investment. Sister Barbara, I know you mentioned earlier, you've made this important investment in your own capacity as a team to be doing this impact investments. And I know that sometimes that has really meant that you've been able to show up as a community in ways that really participate and shape a different investment landscape. So where there may have been a deep desire to do very mission-driven investing, maybe sometimes the products that you were seeking weren't always available to you, or you mentioned your portfolio managers were saying, we're here to maximize financial return, maybe not to maximize mission. So can you share a little bit about how your community has been shaping that investment landscape? I know, for example, you actually built a new fund that aligns with your mission. So just tell us a little bit of what you've been up to.
Yeah, I think one of the things that has to be understood is that it takes a lot of hard work, and it takes the right personnel that you need to be able to do these things. So we invested in high quality employees and really have created all kinds of matrix instruments of evaluation that can judge and score various investment opportunities to make sure that what we're doing is mission aligned and has the highest impact. So we are willing to be the first investors in certain companies and organizations that nobody else is willing to invest in, so that other investors see that, well, maybe this is a worthy thing to invest in. Certainly, we put a high emphasis on working in areas regarding the environment, and particularly in the developing world, where people consider those things much higher risk. But it's a continual process of trying to create tools that help us to be as objective as we can, to make sure that the things that we're investing in, they're great things to invest in, and we can't invest in everything that are goods to invest in. So what are those things that are most aligned with our charism? What are most aligned with what we would desire to do as a congregation? So I think that the biggest thing is really investing in the infrastructure that's needed to carry out the goal that you have in the use of your goods.
Thank you, Sister Barbara. That investment in the capacity itself to do this work is itself a missional investment, is itself an investment in living out Laudato Si. So we're grateful for that example and your witness to that work. Nana, I'm curious to just hear you talk a little bit about what you're most excited about when you think about the kinds of opportunities that exist and that are emerging to really invest in line with Laudato Si.
Thank you, Elizabeth. It's been really interesting for us as FaithInvest. So we started only a little bit before the pandemic, and in the past month, this has been the first time where we've engaged in person with those asset owners, with those who are in the faith, who are really managing the money and assets of the faith, to really explore what they're doing and what they're coming up with and what more there is to do. So let's start from where we are here in Wicklow. And just to emphasize again the Tairseach story, I mean, it's really about using what you have, recycling, if you like, really making the most of an asset that you've been given to give back to earth in a way, and to be an example to many. It's not easy to be pioneering, but when you meet those who are pioneering and when we get the chance to share this story, that is extremely exciting, because you find a level of detail, a level of commitment, a level of engagement that really builds up when you share these conversations. So that was Wicklow. Just before that, we had New York. New York, I mean, many of the issues around capacity are clear there, New York and in fact in the US generally. So what was interesting there was, how can we be efficient around finding those kind of grassroots opportunities, around diligencing those kind of grassroots opportunities, and working with partners and experts in industry who are also adapting the way that they look at investment and not be purely returns driven, but to understand impact. Some of them are coming to us and saying, help us to understand impact. What do you mean? When you talk about faith consistency, what are you basing it on? We know that you've spoken about negative screening in the past, but what do you mean by positive investing? What is in your mission? What is in your teachings and your beliefs and your values that is driving you in this way? There's one particular partner, King's Crowd, who we've connected with very recently, who we really want to work with to screen and create investable vehicles, ways to be impactful that fits with the capacity that the faith groups have, but allow them to really be impactful and to see and to track. As Sister Barbara said, you want to know what the impact is. That's why you're doing it. And that groups are out there to help. And then we come to London, and London was interesting because you're seeing traditional managers, again, adapting their models and really engaging with those who invest and talking about new ways to do faith-consistent investing. And a number of these actually have faith groups in their foundation. So you're seeing that kind of full circle coming together in the ecosystem. That is just incredibly exciting. There's a real momentum. It needs to be sustained. It needs to stay energized. And there are challenges along the way as well, but a real momentum, a real energy.
Thank you, Nana. Do we have Father Peter with us? Father Peter, welcome.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us. So, Father Peter, just please introduce yourself to our audience here today and tell us a little bit about the journey that the Jesuit province of Canada has been on, from early days of divestment, where you were pioneering a lot of that work, to now some of what's on the horizon for you as you think about being in right relationship with Indigenous communities.
Sure. Well, first of all, I'm really glad to be with everybody here. This is an important topic. And so I apologize for the technological jungle that slowed me down here, but finally, with lots of help from people in the background, I'm here. So in the Jesuits in Canada, we started thinking about investments in terms of our investments in terms of ecological, social, and governance issues around 2013, 2014, which was just before Laudato Si came out. We had been prepared, I guess, for thinking about this in the 1980s when we got very involved in divestment issues around apartheid in South Africa. We were part of a very active program in Canada, lobbying the banks, the Canadian banks, to withdraw their investments from South Africa in order to stop apartheid. And it was a campaign that succeeded, actually. So that was our baptism by fire, our education in shareholder advocacy. We tried to take some new. We were involved in other groups doing shareholder advocacy, for example, with the Jesuits of the US. And then around 2014, we decided to get a little bit more involved, a little bit more, to try to be more consistent in how we looked at our investment policy from an apostolic point of view, not simply from the point of view of making money for us. So our investment portfolio was not terribly large, and it didn't leave us much room to experiment. That is because we relied on a relatively modest portfolio, and we relied on the income in order to run our operations. Nevertheless, we felt we'd take the risk, and we felt that our investments needed not only to meet our expenses, but they also needed to reflect and promote our apostolic values too. So for 2 years, we worked on an investment policy that would do this. We consulted many organizations, but especially a company called Sustainalytics. I hope it's okay for me to mention a company on this webinar, but they rate the sustainability of companies in terms of environmental, social, and governance performance, or ESG. They helped us to think about our investments in ESG terms. So our new investment policy, we finished it in 2016, and then we started implementing it. So it had 3 distinctive features. One, it was an apostolic instrument, not simply a financial instrument or an instrument for managing investment risk. Secondly, it mandated disinvestment from fossil fuels within 5 years. So we've achieved that. And thirdly, it had not only negative screens, but positive screens. So the negative screens were what we would not invest in and why, and the positive screens were what we would invest in and why. So that was 2016. So where are we at now? So for various organizational reasons, we've been kind of unable to reflect on this in a systematic way for a couple of years. But by next year, we should have the capacity to do that again. What I expect will happen, both inspired by Laudato Si, which has moved us towards more comprehensive ways of thinking, and our relations with indigenous peoples, both of those elements I expect will continue to influence our thinking heavily. So I imagine we will be thinking of our investments in terms of the biome that we live in Canada, and that's the Boreal Forest. So a biome, I would expect that a biome would become the geographical context for our reflection. So our principal biome in Canada is the Boreal Forest. This is the largest forest in the world. It circles the globe, the northern parts of the globe, Russia, Canada, Alaska, and parts of Scandinavia. In Canada, it covers about 60% of our territory. About 13% of the population live there, and about 80%, up to 80% of the Indigenous population of Canada lives in that immense zone. So the shift to a green economy, electric cars, for example, and away from fossil fuels is going to put a lot of pressure on mining. All of those minerals are in the boreal zone of Canada. So there's going to be a lot of pressure towards extraction of minerals in the boreal zone and other forms of extraction like logging and possibly water. And this will lead to conflict and sometimes collaboration with Indigenous communities. So if the church is seriously concerned about our common home and about integral ecological conversion, then we're going to want to collaborate with Indigenous organizations and communities in protecting the integrity of the boreal forest and in promoting sustainable development there. And this is going to be a trend probably for the next 100 years in Canada. And we will want to follow and as well as support Indigenous leadership. Some of that will mean impact investing, I imagine. So I think our investment policy is going to have to become an instrument of this goal for living sustainably in the boreal forest. And our investment policy will have to be a tool of relationship building, in addition to raising funds in a just way for our operations. So this will have a number of practical consequences for us. For example, we'll need to monitor Canadian extractive work. We don't have the capacity to do that by ourselves. So we're going to need to collaborate with many organizations to do this. We know many of them already. And we'll need to collaborate. We'll need expert partners in this, and a network of solidarity. And we would hope to maybe set up a what's the word I'm looking for? An ecclesial network for the boreal forest. And finally, I think the larger context for this kind of effort is to promote new ways of thinking about the economy, new ways of conceiving the economy. For example, Benedict XVI's commentary about economy as gift in Caritatis and Veritate, and then the whole Francesco economy project. So it's not going to be easy to think of the economy in profoundly new ways that are both deep and comprehensive, but I think that needs to be probably the wide context for sustainable investment and investment as a tool of relationship building. I'll stop there, Elizabeth.
Thank you, Father Peter. Thank you for bringing in this dimension of right relationship and relationship building, which is so central to Laudato Si. I'm going to just turn to a discussion here for the remaining few minutes of our time and see if there are folks beginning in the room who would have a question, and I think we're collecting some online as well. Does anyone here in person have a question that you'd like to offer up for this panel, for this group here? I do have one that came in online that I can start with, which was related to this last point that Father Peter mentioned, which is, what does it mean to be in right relationship with our finance and investments? So I think, Sister Barbara, I do want to ask you to reflect on that to start us off. And then if anyone has another question you'd like to offer, please start to think about that. Sister Barbara, can you share How are the Missionary Sisters of the Sacred Heart thinking about what it means to be in right relationship?
You know, that's a challenging question. I think that that's a question that is cross-cutting. It's not just about our financial investments, but, you know, we always have to have our reference points, and our reference points are the teachings of the church, our life in Christ, and our life in prayer, and evaluating. Things are nuanced, and very few of our own investments, etc., are all good or all bad. And it's, so how do we make the best choice? And it's trying to make certain decisions using tools that help us to do that, to try to get some sort of objective measurement involved in this, and just continuing to stay in relationship with the work that we're about, in relationship with other people who are doing the same sort of things, who share the values and the goals that we have, whether they're faith-based or not, but certainly value-based and mission-based, and taking the best shot that we have at doing that. And because all of this is about relationship. I mean, if you talk about Laudato Si, and I think Father, who gave our introductory comments, and even the organization that was highlighted at the beginning there in Ireland, we're all interconnected with each other and with all of creation. And so we just have to do our part to live that with as much integrity as possible, and to take our best shot at doing this, and being collaborators and partners with one another.
Thank you, Sister Barbara. Nana, is there anything that you'd like to say on this point?
It's good to say, to bring from the conversation we had this morning, how much is enough? That is a really fundamental question when we think about the financial aspect of investments. There are people who might ask for market rate. What is market rate? What is sustainable? Just how do you think about that in the context of everything that you want to achieve? So I think that's right relationship is developed over time. How much is enough, and what do you want to achieve with your money? And frankly, if you're investing to give, are there better ways to think about investment? And for those of you who are in the room who know I've been borrowing or stealing your ideas, I just want to share this with a wider audience, because I think this is really what's driving a lot of the commitment to do more, and to think more deeply, and to be far more faith consistent in the way that we manage our assets.
Thank you, Nana.
So, Elizabeth, there's a question coming from someone called Alfonso, who's asking a question to Pauline. How do you do advocacy and investment policy in Africa, where sisters live from what they earn and often depend on outside donors to sustain their ministry?
Okay, Alfonso, that's a good question. I'm not sure whether it has an answer direct, or whether I'll beat about the bush a bit and leave you to find your way. It's a good question. Yeah. Advocacy is a lot of it, what we have done with advocacy has been local. We bring it to the global when we bring it together, and issues that are global. One of the ways that I know that there has been a bit of advocacy in Africa has been the issue of good governance. I know, I can tell you for certain, for example, in my own country, there's been a lot of, during, like now, there's elections coming up. And so what the church would do, and what the sisters would do, is do a lot about civic education, so that hopefully we get good leaders who can support and come up with policies that are supportive of mitigation or adaptation of the climate. So that's one way, and it may not answer for the whole of Africa. It has many needs, but as I said, I leave you to find some way. But I think, yeah, it's something that can only continue to unfold can continue to unfold depending on the needs on the local scene. And as we say in Laudato Si, we don't start from the scratch, we build from where we are. And as we build from where we are, we look at the realities of where we are or around us, and we move with them with the see, judge, and act methodology. I think I leave it there.
Do we have any others on
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So there's another question come in from someone called Ethel, and it says, could someone say a few words about engaging companies about their ESG policies?
Father Peter, I might ask you to start with that.
So let me share an example. So the Jesuits of Canada and the US, we have a group called the Jesuit Committee on Investment Responsibility. And what we do is we get the various Jesuit provinces to put together a certain amount of money that we use then to invest in certain companies where we want to do advocacy. So for example, we've invested in Aura Minerals and in a very large gold mining company whose name has escaped me at the moment. But so we use those shares. We make sure we have enough shares so that we can actually vote in the shareholder meetings, and we use those shares to negotiate with the companies on their environmental policies, their human rights policies, their corporate governance policies. Basically, we buy shares in order to have an influence on the companies. The attitude towards on that part of the companies has changed over the last 15 years. They're a bit more positive because there's more concern about these issues in the public. And we've actually had some success with some companies. American Airlines, for example, would be a good example.
Thank you, Father Peter. Sister Pauline or Sister Barbara, is there anything you'd like to add?
Not really.
Yeah, I would just add in line, when we're going and evaluating who we're going to invest in and who we're not going to invest in, and you vet out those certain companies, we have actually made a decision on some companies that we would say, no, we aren't going to invest in. We do invest in them just because of the influence that we can have as a shareholder. That's a bigger task and somewhat bigger than what our own capacity is. But I think it's right in line with what Father Peter was just now talking about.
Thank you. And I know there are groups, for those who are interested, like the Interfaith Center on Corporate Responsibility and Investor Advocates for Social Justice, who accompany some groups who are thinking about shareholder advocacy strategies in particular. Will you pop up? Yes, please.
The Mercy Sisters have a good organization called Mercy Investment Services. We rely on their advice a lot.
Thank you, Father Peter. Let's pop up 2 more questions from online just to get a little bit, and then we'll move toward closing our panel.
Yeah, so there's a great question here, especially given what's coming up in the next part of the programme. Is there an organisation or structure that can offer the congregations the skills to invest according to Laudato Si, instead of letting each congregation spend money and time on studying its own solutions?
Shall we take that one first?
I'll let you take it first.
So I think this vision for sort of sharing of our resources, our knowledge, our capacity building with one another is exactly where we need to head as a faith landscape. And I think there are a number of organizations that have emerged in recent years, frankly, to provide that kind of support and capacity building for groups. So FaithInvest, which you're hearing about today, is certainly one of those groups working on a global scale in a multi-faith capacity, and Nada can share much more deeply about the investment solutions work that they're doing. The Catholic Impact Investing Collaborative, which we've also been discussing here in person in Ireland earlier today, is specifically serving the Catholic community around direct impact investment opportunities and pathways that can support them. And here today, we're really excited to launch a Laudato Si investing movement. So we will be sharing with you later today some resources that we've been curating and putting together to provide knowledge, skills, and abilities for those who really want to heed the call of Laudato Si and show how that reflects in their own work. And we'll be launching a community of practice for those who want to journey together in those efforts. Is there anything you'd like to add?
I will, because that question is really one of the key ones, the question of capacity. Capacity to do the thinking in the first place, to do that deep missional thinking around what do I positively want to invest in, what does that mean? Father Peter earlier on spoke about how the investment policy statement, guidelines, communication can be a real tool. It's not just a financial tool, it can be an apostolic tool. It can be a real call to action and a real statement of intent. And having the capacity and having groups guide you through what could be in such a guide, what has been done. Some of the foundation of FaithInvest is going back to something called the USIG guidelines, which really looked back and had both faith groups and some of the managers who support them try to identify with varying success, especially for the managers, what their values were, what they stood for, what they cared about. There are organizations like us do really help groups to work through the process, to have frameworks, to ask the questions so that policy statement and foundation can be created. Then there's the capacity to decide what to do about what we've committed to. And again, there are several stages to that. There is unique capacity to just see what's out there, to understand the market. There's an informational gap that many of these groups cannot fill by themselves because it takes time. We provide some of that help. We also do it through the working groups because there's a lot of shared knowledge. And then as you translate that shared knowledge into investment committee meetings, into really working with groups one-on-one, you start to build that capacity within an efficient way. So there are many of us doing this work. And I think there's much wisdom to be shared through Laudato Si.
I'm thinking of a quote that I heard from Father Peter once, who I just saw maybe wants to jump in, which is, "Don't be a prisoner of professional advice." And I thought that was a brilliant sort of piece of advice unto itself, because so much of what we need to do is learn from each other and hear each other's experiences and allow that to embolden us in the questions we're asking of ourselves in our communities. Father Peter, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, what Nana just said is a terrific response to that question, and organizations that can offer help for this kind of investing are growing. In Canada, there's one called SHARE, Shareholder Association for Research and Education, and they work a lot with churches and religious orders. So that comment, don't let yourself be a prisoner of professional advice, that's a real temptation among church people, whether it's you're working with lawyers or investors. In areas where we ourselves are weak, we can take the advice of professionals at face value without questioning. So it's not necessarily the job of your investment manager to think in terms of the gospel. They're thinking, they know the market, yes. They think in terms of managing risk, yes. But you don't have to take their advice, or you can adjust it, or you can seek other advice. But it is our job to apply the gospel. That's not necessarily the advice we're getting from our professionals. So I think we need the advice of professionals, but we need to use it critically as well.
Thank you. As we move toward closing this discussion, yes. I want to just, please.
Sorry, I wanted to say, I think this is a very important question about organizations that can work with the religious congregations. And I know they are there. I know our own people in Canada are in share. But I also want to say that it provides us a unique opportunity to apply or to use our own charism, to bring in our own values. That yes, we have been provided with a support system of professional advice, for example. We don't have to buy it all. It's almost like an advisory board. It gives you advice. You don't have to take it all. But then I think it's the unique opportunity to bring in the charism and the values of our own congregation and our own faith. Yeah.
Thank you, Sister Pauline. I want to extend a huge amount of gratitude to each of our panelists today for really making the path by walking. The creative and courageous responses that they're undertaking are really helping lighthouse for all of us what's possible. So thank you.
So thank you to that amazing panel. I think you really agree that they just unpacked this whole area of Laudato Si and investments in an extraordinary way. There's such a wealth of experience. They made so many important points. I'm not going to try and summarize them, but that phrase that Father Peter used at the end there, to be mindful that it's not the job of your investment manager to think in terms of the gospel. That's our job. So it's just something to bear in mind. You might be interested to know that we are over 3,000 people watching this, participating in this webinar live and counting. So we're already a movement of people, of asset owners, of religious who want a new economy based on Laudato Si and are working together to make it happen. Before we move on to the next segment of delving even deeper into the question of investments and what amazing work different communities are doing, let's go back to nature. Let's go back to some of the ancient saints. Hildegard of Bingen. Let's now listen to the great Saint Hildegard of Bingen, reminding us that the earth has always cared for us and called for our respect. The poem and chant we're about to hear is called Plant Chant. We won't hear a translation of it, it's in Irish, but it talks of the medicinal qualities of some native Irish flowers, the dandelions, the foxgloves, the eyebrowed, St. John's wort, and nettles. And interestingly, we all tend to consider these as weeds. We might want to think about that, weeds, or food, or just beauty. It contains a poem in the Irish Gaelic naming each of those flowers by name and a Latin eulogy from Hildegard of Bingen. It's sung by Irish musician Ciara Conway.
Baha nua las waid na wida, realty bui na talún la sú full darug. Lysian tú an dúlagar is an brón is divna, Baha nua is las cholam chile. Rí na livana féirín sí, an véir daul a dortín an chrí, los mór méricán sí, los cré, los naman sí. Lesúle glé gurama is tú banrín na livana, los na manaltra, los an na nain, los mianla machara millish stíl. O nyantóg cool fache, fullan is tani, bí cínse iad ihe 3 úra sa lé. Bahu is lonlú, glas is grúigach, Shanor nyantóg agus trénach, Malacht adavan, rún an lé. Verman vrídze, clog na gwiche, Bleis iscúl fian na gréna, Gradam nach, Barnan, Bernach. O viridissima virga, Ave, que inventoso, Flabro shishitationis, Santorum prodisti. Et illa apparuerunt omnia in viriditates plena. な
So as we heard from our panel before, faith communities, religious sisters, brothers, the church in general, have been involved for many decades in trying to influence change in the financial system, also through their advocacy and through their campaigning work. So we're now joined by Lyndon Moma, who is the Director of Advocacy with the Laudato Si Movement. Hi, Lyndon.
Hello, Lorna.
Lyndon's joining us from South Africa. And Lyndon, you're going to tell us a bit about the way that we can get involved in some campaigning work to raise our voices together, because we know that we can do our own investing work, but we also need to influence a bigger change in the financial system. So Lyndon, do you want to tell us a bit about the work that Laudato Si Movement is doing and how we can all get involved?
Of course. Thank you, Lorna, so much. It's been a wonderful first session, really rich experience being shared there. And again, just the wealth of knowledge and the work that we're doing in terms of ecological financing and climate justice is just a joy to hear. I'll be speaking about the call to divest from fossil fuels, but also how to invest in ecological financing. I always like to start with a quote from Pope Francis. This has been said by the previous speakers. Pope Francis tells us in Laudato Si that in fact, he's very clear that, burning fossil fuels is a major contributor of global warming. I think that is no question. The science is clear and that is true. And so it's our responsibility to transition away from fossil fuels. All people and organizations can lead such a transition by divesting from fossil fuels. Those companies that do not meet the parameters of integral ecology, and instead invest in companies that place sustainability and social justice and the promotion of the common good at the center of activities. I was so pleased when Sister Barbara said it was not about just growing the principle. It's about sustainability, social justice. It's about the common good. And Pope Francis, on that basis, we move on to see what is happening in the world today. Even though the science is clear, but yeah, we do know that politicians are ignoring the science. And I just want to state that last year was a landmark year where we had the executive director of the International Energy Agency. This is an agency that actually promotes the use of energy and has been promoting the use of fossil fuels for a couple of years. They came out and said, in order for us to avoid the climate catastrophe which we're already experiencing, we should stop putting our money in coal and gas. There's no room for new development within coal and gas. And it was so heartbreaking to see the UN Secretary General tweet about a month ago that politicians are lying. The science is clear, and he said that some governments and business leaders are saying one thing and doing another to tackle the climate crisis. And he's very clear, he says they are lying, and we should stop burning our planet. The war in Ukraine is a stark reminder that the fossil fuel industry and the extractive industry have been fueling wars for a very long time, and also autocratic regimes' long history of human rights abuses. This has been a journey. Can we go back to the slide before, please, Gabriel? The invasion of Ukraine by Russia, it's actually it's showing the world that, the war is being fueled by oil and gas, largely sold to Europe. Politicians, instead of moving, from fossil fuels, are actually rushing to other parts of the world, Africa and the Middle East, to look for other sources of oil and gas. This is not helping the climate crisis. Next slide, please. So it's imperative that as Catholics, people of faith, we are called to protect our common home, to protect creation by divesting from fossil fuels. We cannot leave it only in the hands of politicians. Divesting from fossil fuels is the most concrete way that we respond to the call to hear the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor. every act of divestment is a vote for clean energy, it's a vote for social justice, it's a vote for economic justice. Fossil companies know this, and they're realizing this. They know that divestment is going to cripple them. And we even had Shell saying that the divestment movement is a material risk to their bottom line. Next slide. And we know that it works. I am speaking from South Africa, and we know that divestment was a key part of toppling the apartheid regime. Father Peter referred to this in the earlier session. Divestment was really important, one of the key factors that brought the apartheid regime to the negotiating table to end the crippling human rights abuses and marginalization of Black communities, majority Black communities. Divestment also ended and forced the apartheid regime to usher in a new democratic system and negotiating with political prisoners. The world stood up for political prisoners. It stood up for human rights violation. It stood up against the apartheid regime by moving their money. It stood up by taking out their money from supporting the apartheid government. Next slide. So divestment is impactful, and Catholic divestment is impactful. Last year, Laudato Si Movement with other colleagues, Green Faith and Operation Noah, we led 72 faith institutions from 6 continents to divest more than $4.2 billion of combined assets from the fossil fuel industry. They publicly divested this money from the fossil fuel industry and put it in clean investments from all over the world. So we know that it is impactful. Divestment is making a change. It's putting a dent in the fossil fuel industry. Next slide. Just to share some really wonderful experiences of Catholic divestments. In October 2016, inspired by Pope Francis, the Missionary Society of St. Columban's pledged to take steps to divest from fossil fuels. In addition, they committed to putting resources into positive impact in investment alternatives. According to them, and what we all share today, Pope Francis is leading the way for Catholic institutions to choose to divest and reinvest when he writes in Laudato Si on care for our common home, that technology based on the use of high polluting fossil fuels need to be progressively replaced without delay. Also, next slide, the Catholic Irish bishops have also divested. In August 2018, a statement by Bishop William Crean announcing the decision of the Bishops' Conference to divest from fossil fuels. And he noted, saying that today, on the eve of Pope Francis' historic visit to Ireland, I wish to announce the decision of the Irish Catholic Bishops' Conference to divest from fossil fuels. In doing so, we are responding directly to Pope Francis' call in his 2015 encyclical letter, Laudato Si, on care for our common home by moving away from fossil fuels without delay. And earlier on this year, next slide please, the Filipino bishops actually pledged to divest. They urged the Catholic Church to remove their money away from fossil fuels and to disconnect from the fossil fuel industry. They pledged that to remove all their assets from the fossil fuel industry by 2025. Taking a further step, they said they would not even receive donations from fossil fuel industry players. That is a huge step in not only saying we're going to take our money out of the fossil fuel industry, but we're not also going to receive any donations from the fossil fuel industry. In this day and age of the climate crisis, we cannot afford to be silent. We cannot afford to not take action, because being silent or being inactive is complicity. We may moderate our consumption and embrace sustainable lifestyle, including renewable energy technology, which is laudable. However, without careful attention to how money is invested, there is a strong possibility of supporting the very practices and industries that are degrading our planet. For instance, it is estimated that the world spends less than 90 billion a year on conservation and nature protection. In comparison, governments spend more than 5 trillion every year on subsidizing the fossil fuel industry. So how do we divest? How do we move away from the fossil fuel industry? We start, first of all, by creating a roadmap. Meet our commitments to take care of creations. We meet with our community, we create a roadmap. We discuss our overall values of Catholics based on Laudato Si with management. We discuss how we want to align our investments with our values. And then we take a pledge. We take a fossil-free pledge at the level that is right, that you want to begin with. So it's important to take that first step. Your fossil-free pledge can start with divesting from coal, divesting from tar sands, divesting from oil. You could choose to divest partially or divest fully from fossil fuel. You could also choose to divest fully or partially in a couple of years, in 1 year or 2 years. It does take time. It's important to start that first step. And then you update your investment policy to reflect your new decision, to reflect your new values, to reflect your new economic decisions. And you discuss this with your financial advisors. The key word here is discussing it, not taking all the advices that come from your financial advisors. Next slide. And then where do you move the money? The earlier session talked a lot about faith-consistent investing, living Laudato Si. And FaithInvest actually does help religious groups to invest in line with their values. The world's faiths have billions of dollars invested in global markets across all asset classes. We don't want to be the ones who make the mistake in investing in the fossil fuel industry ignorantly, without knowing. So FaithInvest supports the rapidly growing movement. We've just seen that movement here of faith actively using their investment to create a better world for people and the planet, creating a better world for social and economic justice. The faiths are a natural powerhouse for ethical, faith-based, and impact investing. So, when do we divest? We always want to announce our divestment commitments. And please, we invite you to be part of the next divestment announcement that will take place on the 6th of July, 2022. You can reach out to laudatosimovement.org @divest. Also, you can reach out to FaithInvest to see how to invest and live Laudato Si. Thank you.
Thank you, Lyndon. That was just wonderful, and I think that gave us a real kind of sense of one small step, as the children said, that we can all take together. And one of the reasons why we have these announcements periodically around divestment is because it builds momentum. If everybody does it individually, nobody really notices. But if you collectively make a decision and you make that step together, it really has a massive impact. And as Lyndon rightly said, the fossil fuel industry are noticing, and in the annual report of Shell, it noted the rise of the fossil fuel divestment movement as a material risk. So that's something quite significant that a pressure point that we can apply if that works for us. So I'd now like to introduce Sister Sheila Kinsey, who had hoped to be with us live today, but in fact is in Kyiv as part of a delegation of religious leaders to bring the support and the solidarity of the faiths to the people of Ukraine. So she has sent us a video message. Sister Sheila Kinsey is the coordinator of the JPIC at USIG based in Rome. And she has a really strong message around the need for reinvestment in sustainability, divestment, and using our collective voice to influence change.
Thank you, all of you, for joining this webinar, this whole session on faith-consistent investing in the spirit of Laudato Si. My name is Sister Sheila Kinsey. I am a Franciscan sister, daughter of the Sacred Hearts of Jesus and Mary. I am the executive co-secretary of the JPIC Commission for both unions, USG and UISG, which is men and women religious congregations. and also the coordinator of Sowing Hope for the Planet, which is an initiative with religious congregations, but has also been involved very strongly with our men's congregations as well. And this video that you're listening to is recorded as I am returning from Kyiv. This is a journey that has been asked by the mayor of Kyiv for world religious leaders to come to Kyiv to be in solidarity with the people there, to pray for peace, to pray that the bombing stops, killing stops, that peace can return to the Ukraine area, and also to be with them as they're distributing food and medicines. It's just a way of being an accompaniment with our people there. Now, we visit the Ukraine area, but we are very conscious of conflicts around the globe. And so we don't want to minimize those conflicts, but we want to hold them in our hearts as we are engaged in this particular area. And so when we talk about faith investing, it's about being with people. Yes, money is involved, but money and investing is a moral act. And when we talk about the Laudato Si Action Platform, the money and our simple lifestyle are our drivers for all of what we're doing with our goals. It's how we listen to the cries of our earth and the cries of our poor. It's how we go about our education, how we spell our spirituality, and then the advocacy that we take place. And in our work with Sowing Hope for the Planet, we've asked a number of our religious congregations, we've got about 270 that completed a survey in terms of the work that they're doing in advocacy on all of the goals. And in particular related to this investment on the economy, for example, the investment that they're doing in alternative ways of dealing with alternative energies, land conservation, organic gardening, looking at the plastics and trying to come up with new ways to deal with that, the use of plastics in buildings and in fences and pavements. I mean, it's incredible. The creative ideas that people are sharing, and then the divestment in the fossil fuels, and then also having some of our religious really being at the table and making proposals that are being listened to and trying to make some headway in terms of our corporate understanding of all of us need to be able to benefit from our resources. So in this process that we have with Sowing Hope for the Planet, we have invited those who are working in advocacy on the different areas of the goals, as I mentioned, to be a part of conversations. So, for example, one of the conversations was on the biodiversity and on climate change, and we had someone talking about the investment fund, the pension fund, that was happening in one of the countries. And as another of our religious was listening, wow, it was happening, it was about the divestment of fossil fuels, but the thing about it is that they were investing in monocropping, in the Amazon area. So when they were listening to one another, they saw that there was a synchronicity between watching how the monies are being invested on a pension fund, actually it was in Japan, and how that was impacting what was happening in Brazil. So these conversations and this data collection, which is really seems to be the hub of this faith-consistent investing, has a dynamic way of entering into some of the areas that we need to be looking at. And for example, the Ukraine and the Russian situation, fossil fuel is there, the wheat harvest is there. How are we looking at this as a community when we think about the people that are infected and the monetary outcome that we're having to be dealing with? So this opportunity to come together with areas that matter to us, with the background, with the willingness to work together, is an important adventure. And I would say it's a new frontier for us as religious, for us as laypersons, for us with the same mindset to work together to make a difference. There are some congregations, the Dominicans, for example, have worked together and have an investment pool and working with other congregations, the Mercy Sisters, for example, they have found a way that can help us move forward in this endeavor. And I think the more that we can work together, as Pope Francis says, the whole is greater than the parts. even the sum of the parts. So here we are as a faith-consistent investing community, looking at a way that we can make Laudato Si a vibrant undertaking for us as we enter into our place of influencing the world to make it a better place. So thank you, all of you, for listening to this and continuing on this journey to really help one another define what is ours to do and to listen to the call of the Spirit to bring us forward in a new way of being together. Thank you.
Thank you to Sister Sheila for that really engaging, arousing, and very sobering message from Kyiv, where we see the real what happens when it all starts to fall apart in a very real way. So we're coming to the end of our session and our day together here in County Wicklow. And I think what's really come out for me, one of the things that's really come out of this day together, is the need to continue to have conversations of the real value that there is in coming together in conversation around some of these really important, really critical topics. So the question I have coming to the end of this day is, how do we build momentum and how do we stay connected? So I'm going to invite Elizabeth to come back up here, because FaithInvest, in partnership with a number of other groups, including the Laudato Si Movement, the Laudato Si Action Platform, has been working behind the scenes to develop a new resource online, which is specifically geared for faith investors, Catholic, other faiths, but rooted in Laudato Si, to provide some ongoing support and to try to start to build that sense of momentum and community. So Elizabeth, over to you.
Thank you, Lorna. So we have some slides that we'll share here. And Gabriel, you can jump to the next slide. As you've listened to the stories of individuals and groups around the world who are taking bold and courageous action to divest from unsustainable and unethical investment holdings, and also to take steps to invest in a future where all can flourish, what does it spark for you? Where has your conscience been pricked? And where has your curiosity been piqued? What do you believe is your most important work to do to live out Laudato Si? In these last few minutes we have together, I'm excited to share a preview of a hub where we hope we can equip you with reflection and resources and relationships as you discern what is yours to do, as Sister Sheila just shared with us. This hub will focus on supporting those who are seeking to put into practice the goal of an ecological economics that Pope Francis calls us to embody. This is a bold and a necessary step to build a sustainable future and an integral ecology. Hearing and heeding the cries of the earth and the poor and of future generations has real implications for how we steward our resources. And as a people of faith, we must act on our collective responsibility to each other and, of course, to our common home, and apply our resources in ways that secure the common good. Next slide. So this hub, which we will continue to build in the months and the years to come together, includes resources such as a Laudato Si reflection guide with practical exercises to help bridge some of the ideas you've been hearing about today with practice. So things like an internal assessment and questionnaire that you can use. Things like a framework for thinking about participation. We spoke about this question of being in right relationship, and Laudato Si calls us to be in a culture of encounter, to be listening authentically. So what does that mean as we discern how we go about our investments? How are we listening authentically to others? We have audio meditations on the themes of Laudato Si and ecological economics. And we've also curated many resources from a variety of organizations who are doing so much work to support faith-consistent or faith-first investing. Groups like the Catholic Impact Investing Collaborative, Fatica, Faith in the Common Good, Find Impact, the Interfaith Center for Corporate Responsibility. investor advocates for social justice, Catholic Relief Services, Catholic Climate Covenant, and so many others. And we have built case studies where you will be able to read and listen to reflections like you've heard today from people who are putting this into practice. So it hopefully will help make more accessible some very practical steps that you can be taking in your own journey. Next slide. We know that putting Laudato Si into practice in this area is a journey. And it's a journey in which we need to be protagonists. We have to be, as Pope Francis calls us, to be protagonists of transformation, because sometimes this way will require going against business as usual. It will probably require us to go against the grain. And this is why Pope Francis invites us to be workshops of hope. We have to be incubating ideas and approaches that sort of light the way for many others who are seeking to create a more just world. Next slide. We've been called into this 7-year journey, and it's no coincidence, by the way, that the Laudato Si Action Platform calls us into a 7-year journey, because 7 signifies, in our faith tradition, it's a number that signifies completion or fulfillment. So how can we be protagonists in this new creation story and in this transformation that we're seeking? The good thing is you are not alone in that work. In 2019, Pope Francis launched something called the Economy of Francesco, where he called on young people around the world to build a new moral economy. I was one of those people who responded with a great deal of enthusiasm and founded something called the Francesco Collaborative, which is a network of investors that we are connecting to one another into the solidarity economy. And we've been launching workshops that we call Livable Future Investing Workshops, where we are creating communities of practice to help people accompany one another in this work. And we're just really excited to be working with FaithInvest to create a workshop that's rooted in this theme of Laudato Si. Our Holy Father is calling us into a global movement that puts this into action. And so we're launching a global workshop for all of you who are seeking to steward your resources and invest in ways that really embody these ideals of Laudato Si. So from October 1st through 21st, we will hold an online Livable Future Investing workshop for those who want to encounter new ideas, learn about new tools, frameworks, and most importantly, meet one another and build relationships so that together we can move the markets, we can move the economy. So we invite you to join us in this workshop. We will be holding information sessions. You can learn about it, learn what's entailed. You can find it and register for it on the Hub site. Next slide. So this is our invitation to you. It's to join a global movement to be a protagonist of transformation in this area of finance and investing. We want you to tap into the insights of Laudato Si to build a livable future for humanity and for our common home. We're going to invite you in this hub to share your own Laudato Si investing story with us. The more we can learn from and collaborate with each other, the more we will find ease in our paths moving forward. So this is where you can find the hub, and we will be making that widely available, but we're excited to have you join us there today. And thank you for being with us, and thank you for what you're doing to prepare the future.
Thank you, Elizabeth, and you will be hearing an awful lot more, I'm sure, about the Investor Hub in the coming days and weeks. When we send out the video recording of this event, we'll also include those details that Elizabeth gave on how you can register, sign up for this online workshop. I must say, it's not a full-time workshop. You don't have to give up 21 days. It's something you can do in between your work. And it's designed specifically for people in the faith communities, particularly in the religious orders and wider faith groups, who are responsible for the management of assets. So it's a great resource for you. We're coming very close to the end now, and I would like to invite Martin Palmer, who is the CEO of FaithInvest, one of the co-organising partners for this event in Laudato Si Week, to come and share a few reflections on this day that we've spent together in County Wicklow. Martin, over to you.
Thank you, Lorna. Well, I don't know about anybody else. I think this is quite extraordinary. Absolutely extraordinary, what we've heard, what we've seen. It's not as though we're talking about something that ought to happen. We're talking about something that is happening. And that each of you here and all of you watching and listening have the capacity to make that difference and make it shift. As Lorna said, FaithInvest has had the privilege of being part of this whole venture, along with the Laudato Si Movement, along with AMRI and this wonderful centre here, which if you've not visited before, they have a French chef. Not that that's the main purpose, obviously it's also deeply spiritual, but they do have a French chef. And it's incredible because in a sense this whole event came together because of partnerships. And that's the heart of this. None of us are being asked to invent this by ourselves. I am the CEO of FaithInvest. I have absolutely zilch understanding of investment, but I do understand faith. Nana, thank God, understands investments and pretty good on faith as well. Lorna just seems to know everything. So at least that's the impression she gives. So, but I want to take us back to something else that is fueling this. On October the 4th last year, Pope Francis, along with a host of other religious leaders from all the major faiths, launched an extraordinary statement. Now, I've been working in the environmental religion world for 40 years. I cannot tell you how many worthy statements from religions denouncing everybody else and pointing the finger at them have been issued. Hundreds of them, and nobody remembers a single one. And this one was unique, because apart from telling everybody off from what they should have done, it had in its second half two commitments. One was to make bold plans, and the second was to move investments in order to respond to climate change, but to the wider environmental issues. And we were honoured to have a small role in that. And it's happening. We have a programme that's headed by my colleague Catherine here, which is called Faith Plans, which is working with dozens of faith organizations, Sikhs, Buddhists, Muslims, Hindus, Christians, to create new plans. You're not alone in this. The Catholic world is not alone in this. There are many, many other faiths that are walking this path. And we, as FaithInvest, are here to help you. We produce things like this, Good Intentions, which is the first survey of what the faiths actually say they want to do with their money. It's slightly depressing. But it does give us a target to say by the time we do the next one, we want to have a lot more doing that. So it's an incredibly exciting adventure that we're on. And I've worked, as I said, for 40 years in the environment movement. And as a person of faith, there's one thing that we find almost always missing. And when I mention it, people in the environmental movement look at me as though I'm slightly odd and ought to be probably put quietly away in some room and forgotten. And that is, I say, we must celebrate. And we as religious people know that you can ask people to fast for Lent or Advent, or Ramadan in Islam, or Pansa in Buddhism, and then we party. Easter, Eid al-Fitr, USIG, we party. We know that to encourage people to move, it's not enough to tell them what you're against. You need to celebrate what you are for. So I'm going to finish my bit before we hand over for a more quiet prayer. I'm not a Catholic. I'm surrounded by them. Most of my staff seem to be Catholic and very good friends of Lorna's. But I'm an Anglican. Now, the Anglicans, we're a little bit undemonstrative, basically. So we do have one tradition, one way of celebrating. And I'm going to ask you, all of you here, to stand up. All of you at home, if you're sat down, stand up. You've been sat down for 2 hours. You need to stretch, get a bit of breath, get a bit of stretch, because we've got so much to give thanks for. We've got Laudato Si. It's astonishing what that's done. We've got the Laudato Si movement. It's incredible what that's doing. We've got all of you here, all of you listening. So I'm going to teach you a particularly English way of celebrating, all right? And that is called hip, hip, hooray. You see, it's already producing mirth and joyfulness. So what happens is I say hip hip, and then you roar back, hooray. I want you all to do this at home. All right, we are listening. It's not just one way, you know. Now we're monitoring a lot of you. So I'm going to do it 3 times. My past experience is the first time you do it, it's pathetic. People go, oh, hooray. So we're going to try and do it really properly. So are you all ready? I'm so sorry. Are you all ready? Yes! Okay. So for the wonder of what the Pope has done with Laudato Si, hip hip! Hooray! Yeah, well, we'll try a little better on the next one, shall we? For all that, the movements to move us to be faith consistent in everything we do, our land, our money, our teachings, everything. Hip hip! Hooray! Yeah, that was better. Final chance, all right? There's a lot of dust up here that keeps disturbing. I'm sorry about that, sister, but it's beginning to come down. So the final one is to give a great cry of joy for a belief in a loving God of all creation. Hip hip! Hooray! Enjoy.
Thank you, Martin, for waking us up after 2 hours of talking. I think that was well needed. I wonder how the translators translate. We have now come to the end of this day together, and for those watching, 2 hours together. I'm sure we could spend much more time. It's certainly. Let's get a hip hip hooray trending on Twitter. It feels like we could spend much more time talking, and as Elizabeth said, we really hope that we will continue the journey that we have been on today. We'd like to end with a prayer, with the prayer of Laudato Si, the prayer for the earth. So I'd invite Elizabeth to come back up, and we will end with the prayer for the earth. And please feel free to join in as we lead the prayer together.
All-powerful God,
you are present in the whole universe and in the smallest of your creatures. You embrace with your tenderness all that exists. Pour out upon us the power of your love, that we may protect life and beauty. Fill us with peace, that we may live as brothers and sisters, harming no one.
O God of the poor,
help us to rescue the abandoned and forgotten of this earth, so precious in your eyes. Bring healing to our lives, that we may protect the world and not prey on it, that we may sow beauty, not pollution and destruction. Touch the hearts of those who look only for gain, at the expense of the poor and needy. Teach us to discover the worth of each thing, to be filled with awe and contemplation, to recognize that we are profoundly united with every creature, as we journey towards your infinite light. We thank you for being with us each day. Encourage us, we pray, in our struggle for justice, love, and peace. Amen.
And on that note, I'd just like to say a huge thank you to all the partners who made this very special day possible. To Tairseach, to Sister Colette, who welcomed us into their home today, and I think have taught us so much about what it means to invest in the mission of integral ecology. To AMRI, to the Association of Leaders of Missionaries and Religious in Ireland, who joined forces with FaithInvest in order to convene this space together. To the Laudato Si Movement that has helped to make this such a global event this afternoon, and to the JPIC of USIG, so many acronyms there, and Sister Sheila, who spread the message about this event to their global networks. And to everybody else, happy Laudato Si Week, and hopefully see you again soon. Bye-bye.